I gotta fix my hair.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Eller, and I am the campaign director for Define American. And I have the distinct honor tonight of moderating this amazing panel, which is Define American's very first ever Google Hangout. We would love for you to ask questions during the Q&A, and there is a Q&A app to the right of your screen. If you type in your questions to the right, hit submit. We'd just love to hear from you, and we will do that soon. Throughout history, every major successful movement has involved people from diverse backgrounds, including people of faith. Our movement is now growing as well, and diverse faith leaders are joining in the struggle for immigrant rights, including evangelical Christians. So tonight, we are extremely blessed to have my very dear friend, Jose Antonio Vargas. Jose is a Pulitzer-Prize winning journalist, filmmaker, and founder of Define American, which is a media and culture campaign that seeks to elevate the conversation around immigration and citizenship in a changing America. Of course, he's the writer and director of Documented, which goes through the story of his life in many ways, and all the way documenting the New York Times Magazine that published his groundbreaking essay he wrote when he came out as an undocumented American. He's written for a lot of newspapers, of course, and was senior contributing editor for the Huffington Post. Also joining us, really excited to have Lisa Sharon Harper. She's currently Sojourners Director of Mobilizing, previously served as the founding executive director of New York Faith and Justice, an organization at the hub of a new ecumenical movement to end poverty in New York City. Her writing has been featured in numerous publications where she's written extensively on tax reform, comprehensive immigration reform, tonight's topic, healthcare reform, poverty, racial and gender justice, which we may also get into tonight, and transformational civic engagement. Lisa's first book is Evangelical Does Not Equal Republican or Democrat. And then in 2011, she wrote a book, Left, Right, and Christ, Evangelical Faith and Politics, which was co-written by an evangelical Republican who's also a Tea Partier. She was celebrated on Rick Warren's website, purposedriven.com, as one of the site's inaugural 7 Take Action heroes, and is currently in the ordination process with the Evangelical Covenant Church. We are also joined tonight by Gaby Pacheco, an undocumented American, an immigrants' rights leader from Miami, Florida, who currently serves as the director of the Bridge Project. She has been speaking about her lack of papers since high school, and at Miami-Dade College, she was elected statewide student body president, raising the issue of in-state tuition for undocumented students throughout Florida, which led to political change and a climate of acceptance in many community and state colleges there. In 2010, most of us know Gaby when she and 3 friends walked 1,500 miles from Miami, Florida to Washington, D.C. to bring light to the plight of immigrants in this country and to urge President Obama to stop the separation of families and deportations of DREAM Act eligible youth. This walk was dubbed the Trail of Dreams, and as political director of the national youth group United We Dream, she spearheaded efforts that led Obama to announce the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, which we'll probably also mention again tonight. She's got a bunch of college degrees, and she has the distinct honor of being one of my favorite people on the planet. Also, one of my new favorite people is Reverend Carlos Malave, our final panelist, executive director of CCT, which stands for Christian Churches Together. It's a national organization that brings together churches from all Christian traditions in the United States. And I actually believe it could be at this time the largest and most diverse ecumenical organization in the nation. Malave has served before that for 11 years as Associate for Ecumenical Relations for the Presbyterian Church USA, and he previously served in pastoral ministry in California and Puerto Rico, and has been a fixture in working with the evangelical immigration table and is doing everything he can to join in this conversation. So, without further ado, let's get to the panel. I'd like to begin tonight, and then we'll start getting to the Q&A questions from the public, with you telling us from your reference point as faith leaders or as leaders in the immigrant rights movement, what do you think that most people in the U.S. don't know about immigration but should? Go ahead.
Right, maybe I could start. This is Gaby, and one of the funniest things that I hear all the time people talk about is immigration as an issue that deals specifically with not just one race, but also one country. And they usually talk about Mexico. So a lot of times, even during the Trail on the Walk, a lot of people kept on saying and telling me that I needed to go back to Mexico. And while I thought that it would be nice to go to Mexico and visit and see, that beautiful country, I would have to explain to people that, in fact, I was not Mexican and I was from Ecuador. And that just shows, right, the level of ignorance that is out there on this issue, but also that this issue is so complex that sometimes people just want to make it so simple and make it just so narrow about one person or one country.
I think I'll jump in here. I mean, I think that if you were to ask most evangelicals, of which I'm one, what do you think about immigration reform? I think that most, at least about a year ago, I'd say still a good number now, might say it's really about the rule of law, or it's really about the law and the fact that we need to obey the laws. And because people have broken the law, they need to pay the price and be sent home. And that feels like a logical conclusion. You're here illegally, you should go home. But what they don't realize is that in Scripture, actually, the way that our laws are set up right now are absolutely directly counter to the way that God tells us to interact with immigrants in Scripture. In fact, there's in Leviticus 19:31, there's a whole thing about how we're supposed to be treating immigrants the same as we treat citizens. And if we did that, then, immigration, an infraction in immigration reform is a civil offense. It's just like getting a speeding ticket. You don't take away somebody's car or make them drive over the border and leave their car there and then come back or whatever because they got a speeding ticket. You give them a ticket, they pay a fine, they make things right, and then they go on. And so God actually in Scripture talks about the way that we're supposed to be treating immigrants as fairly and justly as we would expect to treat citizens.
I'll follow here. I think that something that people are, there's a lot of ignorance is about the level of the contribution that immigrants are doing in this country, and Jose Antonio on the film, which we will talk about this later, it's one of the best examples. But immigrants are contributing in so many ways, and sometimes when we try to inform the public, we put emphasis on the financial and economical aspects of the contributions that immigrants are doing in this country, and which is huge and important. But also I would like to add that another factor in terms of the contribution of the immigrant to this country is actually the faith factor. Most of the immigrants who come to this country with profound faith, with great faith, and that's one of the reasons why they are able to move forward in life, even with all the difficulties that they have to bear, and it's because of their faith. So the contribution based on the faith of the people who are coming to this country and that have been coming immigrants through so many years, it's in many ways revitalizing and reshaping the spiritual and the religious landscape in our country, and the contributions in the spiritual arena is huge. What immigrants are doing.
I guess I just wanted to make a comment about, and this is why, I mean, we'll be talking about the film, but where we are right now with this issue is the need for allies, right? I think people forget that, and Gaby and I talked many hours about this when she and I first met, like more than 3 years ago. For every undocumented person in America, there's probably at least 5, 10, maybe 20 American citizens, teachers, educators, relatives, friends, lovers, partners, neighbors, who are all American citizens who support people like us because they know us. They go to school with us, right? They work with us. They taught us in high school and college. Like, the voices of those allies, for the most part, are missing in this movement. The media doesn't talk about it. Whenever the media talks about immigration, it's about the 11 million undocumented people like Gaby and I. Well, guess what? If for every one undocumented person, there's at least 5 or 6 or 7 allies, which means that this is an issue that impacts directly, at least 70, 80 million people, right? So I think we miss that. I think we miss that we are amidst a movement and that there's a growing allies of people, right? And I think that's really, really important to point out. And the film, as you all know, underscore that.
That's fascinating. So a lot of you have used this word movement, which is interesting. I'd love for us to get into that even more. And all of you now have seen this film documented that's starting to get buzz nationally. And so I'm wondering, of course, Jose, feel free to weigh in. You've seen the film more than anybody on the planet, being the director. But what are your thoughts on the film? And specifically within this idea of a movement, where do you think this film right now, in, what are we, late May 2014, what is this film's place in the movement?
I mean, that's a question that I wanted to really answer before I started filming, which is a little more than 3 years ago. I wanted to kind of capture, if people talk a lot about the broken immigration system, and so I wanted to capture, well, what does that really mean, right? And then about halfway into filming, I realized that this film is really about families, right? What families do for each other, right? When my mother put me on a plane when I was 12, that was the ultimate sacrifice that any parent can possibly make, right? And so we chronicle that. So we document what that is for one person. But my goal in also making the film is to chronicle and document this movement that is happening, right? I'm really proud to say, by the way, that too often when we talk about history, right, when history is written, far too often women and women of color get left out, right? We see this all the time. And I'm really proud that the very first person in the film, right, that is interviewed, straight to camera interview, is a woman named Gaby Pacheco, who was the woman who, when I was, lying and hiding, right, and living as a journalist and not at all comfortable with sharing my immigration status, even to friends that I've known since middle school, it was watching Gaby Pacheco on YouTube videos walk from Miami to DC, right, that inspired me, right? That's why I came out, right? So I wanted to kind of capture what this movement looks like, because Gaby and I are the ones here with you in Google Chat, but we could easily find 30, 40, 50, 60, heroes and heroines and activists who have been courageous and like putting their lives out there. So to me, the film is this unique kind of living, breathing, chronicle of this movement, right? And one person's experience in it, right? I always say that there's a universality in specifics, and you get specific enough, it gets universal. Everybody has a mother, everybody has a son, everybody has a story, and everybody wants to live their lives with dignity. And I think, for me, like that's what the film is about, and that's what this movement is about. Like, we are fighting for more than pieces of papers, right? Although that would be great to get a driver's license and a pass and a green card. We are fighting for a liberation of people, right? That's what we're fighting for.
Yeah. And I think that for me, watching the film, I saw what, since I was a little girl, growing up as a Christian, I was taught. And that was, I remember talking about the commandments, and I remember memorizing the 10 Commandments, and then coming to Scripture and learning about the two greatest commandments of all, right? And it says that you shall love God with all your heart, with all your soul. And then it says the second commandment is that you should love your neighbor as yourself. And that was so impactful because to me, I was like, okay, everything just kind of doesn't matter if you have love. And the love that Jose's mom, Jose's family had for him went beyond everything. That love was a love that, like the Reverend was saying before, it's what really moves our families to make that very long trudge across sometimes oceans, many countries. Some people have to go through deserts to get to the United States, and they do it because of love for their families. And so I remember watching the film and at a point being so angry with Jose because Jose wouldn't add his mom on Facebook and thinking, why would you do that if your mom did all this for you because she loved you? And so I think of that scripture and I think about how we are missing a lot of love in our country and how people are not able to see themselves and see their neighbors and offer that love. And I question sometimes, I saw once a rally that they had here in DC, and there was a few hundred people, and I remember seeing a pastor come on stage and talk about undocumented people. And the way he talked about us was, like we were evil, and I thought to myself, wow, if he only knew that we're the same people that are going to church, going to school with probably their kids and friends and our neighbors, right? And how he is missing the point of what the Bible says, that you shall love God and you shall love your neighbor as yourself.
I think for me, it's funny. I saw the film on the last day of the Fast for Families bus tour when we rolled into DC. And actually, it's ironic, Gabby, because we had one of those big rallies right in front of the Capitol, and it was actually, but it was incredible. Obviously, it was positive, and that night actually was I guess it was the premiere of the movie, and went to go see it and was amazed that I knew so many people in the film. and I knew them because I had been a part of the Fast for Families. And I remember actually I asked, I believe it was Cecilia Munoz, in a meeting at the White House. We were talking about, what was it about the tent, that tent experience with Fast for Families that was so powerful for the folks who came. And what she said was that it was a sanctuary. And it was a sanctuary because of the stories. And that's the same for me. The thing that was so powerful about the movie, Documented, was the same thing that was so powerful about the experience for me of doing the fast. Because every single day that we fasted, and myself and 4 other people, including Eliseo Medina, we fasted for 21 days. And along with others who fasted, a total of 30 altogether people. And when we went in every single day, we feasted on each other's stories, and it became more human. And I think that was the thing that most struck me, was that, I'm an advocate. I'm out talking about all kinds of stuff all the time, and immigration reform was one of those things. But as an African American, I didn't have that much connection to it, right? I didn't think of it as my thing. I thought of it as I am standing with, in solidarity, but it still felt distant. But I'll tell you, Jose, in your movie, the story of you and your mom, I know that's going to come out probably a couple times, so we're going to say this because it was so powerful. It humanized it. Mm-hmm. It made us understand in a new and deeper way how very much this broken system wrecks people. I mean, it wrecks families. And the thing that just struck me is that, you know, as an evangelical and as people of faith, we talk about the family as this sacred unit, as the most sacred unit of human existence, of the world, and yet we're willing to stand for a system like this that wrecks families and puts asunder that which God has joined together. So I was one of those folks with the tissues and the tears at the end of the movie, and it was because you humanized it in a way that was the story in a way that was beautiful, powerful, and so true.
Let me pick that up right there. Thank you, Lisa. I think that's one of the most powerful aspects of the film. It's the humanity. It's that when we talk about immigration reform, we're talking about our neighbor, and our neighbor who might be a child, a kid, who plays, who cries, who get hurt. So we're talking about real people, and that humanity that comes through the film in a very, I will call it, in a very unpretentious way. And also the film, I think it had an essence of, you cannot say that it's crafted. I mean, it's not that the film is not good, but it's something that has some transparency about the human person. It has honesty. It speaks about something that it's our daily life. And I think that's one of the powerful things about the film, that it presents the life of real people who, with real struggles, with real challenges, who are our children, who are our kids, who go to high school, the neighborhood, who go to the middle school in the neighborhood. So that's very powerful.
Let me just kind of add to this, because I should tell you, and Gaby, as a dear friend of mine, knows this. This was very uncomfortable for me. Like, I cannot even tell you, like, you know, especially as somebody who was so used to like telling other people's stories, so I don't have to like tell you my own. To all of a sudden put the camera on me, and like that, you know, what's been really interesting is now that some friends of mine who I've gone to middle school with are seeing the film. Some of them tell me, like, you know, it's like seeing you for the first time, because I kind of really hit it. You know, I hit it even for myself, right? But I think, let's talk about pain. Because I actually think if the American public if the American public really knew what's at stake in this issue and what the issue is really about, they would not stand for it. They would say it's un-American that we're separating families in this way. They would say that it's un-American, right? That we are not honoring, as you said, Lisa, you know, the sanctity, the most sacred part of who we are as a society, as a people, is the family unit, right? But the fact of the matter is, and Gaby has said this, in my travels, I mean, Gaby travels a lot like I do, you know, like, I have been shocked at just the level of misinformation, right? And the level of ignorance, right? And that's why in the film, it's really important to show empathy, right? Like, there's a scene in the film where I engage with, you know, a drunken guy at a bar in Alabama, right? Who kind of had a pretty stereotypical, perhaps, idea of people like me and who we are. I can't expect somebody like him to have empathy for me if I can't offer any empathy to him, right? Like, when he said that I'm a contractor, I'm a blue collar guy, and I want to make a certain kind of money, and these people come in and want to charge less, that's a very valid point. And I have to hear that, and we have to recognize that, and we have to recognize the pain that the American public is experiencing, right? And when people are afraid, or they're in fear, or they're anxious, they want to blame someone else, and they think it's us, when really it's not, right? So what I hope that the film does is it kind of opens up conversations, right? And this is what we are about to, you know, at Define American. This is what the Bridge Project is about, what Gaby and her team has been doing to kind of bridge people out. And this is why it's so important that the faith community is a part of this conversation. So we were in Louisville, Kentucky, where Ryan Eller, our campaign director, lives, and we had a great screening at his Baptist church, right? And it was this fantastic gathering of allies, right? And again, you know, like the film isn't overtly religious in a way, but for me, having been raised as a Catholic, you know, I'm Filipino, most of us are Catholics. I had to really learn not just to pray to God, but to pray to each other, right? This idea that as people, we have to pray to each other. And we recently showed a film, for example, actually in San Jose, California, where my aunt lives, and at a Catholic church. It was amazing because it was mostly Filipinos and Mexicans at this church. And I guess they were translating the film in Spanish as it was going. And it was fascinating how two groups of people, right, can relate, speak different languages, but can relate to one story. And what I love is after people see the film, they feel like there's a space for them to talk about their lives and talk about themselves, you know, and talk about their pain, right? It's only one story, it's only one film, and we need to hear more.
Amen.
Amen. Yeah, so thank you all for that. And speaking of conversation and the conversation that we want to start, anyone who wants to can go to the Q&A link on this Hangout, should be to the right of your screen, and put in a question. A number of you already have, and you can vote up and down the questions that you like. The one that's currently voted up is a question that I love because it's an action-oriented question, and it comes from Alicia. How do you recommend that, quote, allies support undocumented Americans?
Well, I'll speak as the Senior Director of Mobilizing at Sojourners, and also Sojourners is a member of the Evangelical Immigration Table. And I know that there's a lot of work with allies going around, going all over the country in multiple different arenas. In our arena, one of the prime places we've been putting our efforts is on communications and mobilizing work on the ground. And so in many cities and states across the country, you're going to find churches especially and faith communities that are actually finding creative ways to engage on the issue of immigration reform. Either they are holding screenings of lots of different films that are out right now about immigration reform, or they are holding educational talking circles where they're actually beginning to learn themselves about the issue of immigration reform, or most important, they are taking their feet to their legislatives, members' offices in the district, and they're actually letting them know that they care. I think, you know, one of the things that I learned early on in my organizing work is that as a Christian, I have a category for advocacy. What that word is in our vocabulary is the ministry of presence. It's the ministry of presence, standing with, being with the ones who are the least of these, or the ones who are the ones who some theologians call the quartet of the vulnerable. Who include the widows, the orphans, the poor, and the immigrant. So there are lots of different ways that churches and faith communities are finding to stand with the immigrant right now. But I think that the most important and most urgent way right now is to get on the phone and call your legislator and let them know you want just immigration reform right now. Now, not in August, not in September, not in 2016. You want it by July 30th. Boom.
Lisa.
Let me can I add something?
Yes,
I'll be short. I think something that I think is very important, at least from the perspective of the churches, is that we hear. I mean, the churches go to D.C. The religious leader, Christian leaders go to D.C. to do advocacy. in favor of the immigrant and immigration reform. But one thing that we hear, and I think that we need to listen to, we hear politicians in D.C. saying, well, it's good that religious leaders come to D.C., but the question they ask is, are they talking to their congregations about this, or are they silent in their congregations? I mean, because we can go to D.C. and make a lot of noise, religious leaders in Washington, D.C. making a lot of noise, but then when we go to our congregations, to our communities, the question is, do we have the gut to stand in our pulpits and say the same thing that we're saying to politicians in D.C.? That's crucial. That's important. We need to do that at the level of our communities, our congregations, because they need to hear that message too.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add really quickly. So I have two verses that really I carry with me, and the other verse is a verse that says that faith without action is dead. And so if we could pray all we want for immigration reform to happen, we can, watch and say, yes, we need to do it. But if we're not getting up, we're not speaking about it, we're not talking about it to our neighbors, to the people in our community, in the churches that we go to, and if we're not picking up the phone and making calls to members of Congress to say, I support immigration reform, nothing's going to happen. And so I think that that's really important, that our allies are important. And this movement, I think Jose says this, and sometimes, I feel like I want to record him and take him with me and play him everywhere we go. But really, if it wasn't for the dreamers and our family speaking up and telling our stories, people wouldn't know about us. But if it wasn't for voters and people and the constituents of these members speaking up about it, we wouldn't be where we're at today. We wouldn't have DACA if the president didn't believe that he needed those people that were going to vote for him and that we're going to reward him for doing something good on immigration. And so for both parties, I think it's really important that our community picks up the phone, does something, goes to the town halls. In August, there'll be all these town halls that the members are going to be having. There's primaries that are still happening. And so people need to really be engaged in order for this issue to move forward.
Can I just add something really quick here? That I think that, in the church, it's very, we want to be good friends to people. We want to love people well, right? We want to stand with. We're pretty nice people, generally speaking, and we know how to be friends. Actually, we know how to take folks food when they're sick. We know how to visit prisoners. We know how to do these things. And in fact, we actually have a very strong movement in the church right now that is really loving on immigrants, that is really standing in the gap. There's a very strong movement of all denominations in the church that is really moving into that space. But the thing that strikes me is that this is really where the rubber hits the road. It's like, from the perspective of the immigrant young girl or boy or young woman who has been going to college. I just got a letter this morning from a woman in New York City who is a graduate of Hunter College, went to InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, was a leader in the fellowship, went through all kinds of really great experiences, graduated, wants to go to grad school, but can't go to grad school because they need to see her papers. They're trying to figure out, even though she is DACA, but they're not sure still if they can take her, right? So when it comes to her dreams, it's not enough that we pray. It's not enough that even that we would stand with her, even physically. If we're not willing to get on the phone and call the legislator who can block her from being able to pursue her dreams, what kind of a friend are we? How much are we actually loving that neighbor? And, Jesus talked about walking the second mile. Jesus talked about loving the enemy. Well, this isn't even our enemy. This is our friend. So how much more?
So thank you for that. That was incredible. We have a number of other questions coming in, and Max Brava has been asking a lot of great ones that are getting voted up. So I'm going to choose the one on the top right now from Max. In your experience, what has been the most effective way to speak to others about immigration and how it affects you personally? It's provocative given our topic on documented. In other words, do you find that the topic must be brought up, in quotes, before speaking about it, or do you initiate the conversation?
Let me just jump in right here. Usually I initiate it, but also because I'm kind of a journalist by nature, and so I ask a lot of questions. But you know what I've really found is people get very uncomfortable once things get personal. Because it's really easy to just say, oh, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I agree with that, I agree with this. We are so inundated. Like, people have been saying that in no other time is this country more polarized and more partisan than ever, right? So we get in our own little Fox versus MSNBC soapbox and that. So I think it's really hard to argue against a story. I love that, what is it? The ministry of presence. God, I love that. It's hard to politicize someone's personal experience. And look, as far as I'm concerned, once I realized that this flag that I've been pledging allegiance to wasn't mine, I was uncomfortable. So I feel like it's time to kind of share that uncomfortability. And I feel like we are not really doing our job really on this issue if we're not making people somewhat uncomfortable, right? So I think it's really important to take things at a personal level without kind of going overboard, right? Like, I mean, I wake up every day, and the question I usually ask myself is, to what extent how do I make sure that I am handling myself with as much humility as possible? It's usually the first question. The second question, how do I make sure that I don't think the world revolves around my struggle and my pain? Meaning, like, how do I make sure that I'm really, empathy, right? Like, I can't ask people to look at my perspective if I'm not willing to see theirs, right? And I think it's so easy to just kind of, oh, I don't agree with that, or that person is racist, or that's too easy. That's too easy. So I think it's okay to be uncomfortable.
I think one of the things that has been just mind-blowing is when we tell people that there is no line, that there is no way to get papers.
Yeah.
And people then start saying, like in the film, this is very common, oh, you should talk to your member of Congress, right? They'll help you out. They can figure it out. Or why haven't you talked to an attorney? And it's the thing is that there's nothing we can do. And once we start telling people that,
Yep.
They're like, oh, I just thought that you wanted to live like this. And I'm like, who wants to live in fear all the time? Who wants to live not being able to travel and work legally and be afraid of taking your child to school? And so I think that for the question that Max asked, we have to bring it up. And I think that we are in a better place than we've ever been before because we've been bringing it up. Because, like Lisa was saying, we're sharing our stories. We are letting people, and this is what Jose also says. He says, we're not coming out, we're letting people in. We're letting people into our lives to get a little grasp, right? And people put on our shoes in order for them to understand the situations that we're living in and empathize, right? And see the human side of it. And I think that that's what really is it's making the difference, and it's going to make the difference when we talk to others.
And I think just to add one little thing there is that, Max, I mean, in terms of bringing it up, I guess if it's like the course of a normal day and, you know, we're just sitting there and we're sipping our tea or coffee or whatever, and you just start talking about immigration reform out of the blue, maybe it might feel a little bit weird to the person sitting on the other side of the table. But at the same time, like, I think that there's ways that life brings it up, even for people who it's not their issue, because this issue surrounds us. I mean, it is a part of the fabric of our society. So when we walk out the door and we walk down the street and we pass that group of men who are standing there, not because they're lazy, but because they're looking for work, or when we go outside and we look, if you're in Los Angeles especially, I mean, in California, and you see the people who are doing the lawns, and you know, immigration, the issues of immigration are all around. If you go to school at all, whether you are in kindergarten or have kids in second grade, or whether you are in college or in grad school, you know somebody for whom that issue is their thing, or one of your professors is probably an immigrant who has that issue themselves. So I think part of it is really just allowing life to raise the issue, allowing the world itself to raise the issue, and allowing ourselves to speak them when they're raised.
Let me just add, I don't have much to ask because Lisa took my line, but you're right on target. I was going to say, I mean, it's unavoidable. Everywhere you go, every aspect of life in our life in America is touched one way or another by the reality of the immigrant in our country. So it's a matter of not how, but well, when we will have the opportunity, because we will have the opportunity left and right to talk about this issue.
Thank you for that. So we've got about a little over 15 minutes left, and so I want to get as many questions as we can in. And so I'm going to choose one that kind of speaks to a number of the questions in the feed, and that comes from Andrea Leon Grossman. And she asks, any plans to form a support group or fundraise to provide help to those who may qualify for either relief or legalization? USCIS forms are very complex and fees are unaffordable for many. So we've had a couple questions actually asking where folks can go for help. And I think that might be an important question for us to address, just since there are so many people viewing this and so many hundreds more that will view this video afterwards. Where should folks go? Anybody got a quick answer?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
So it depends really where you live, and the same way sometimes we have to learn to be tourists in our own cities, and by that I mean learn about the wonderful organizations that are doing this work every day in and out. You know, I could tell you about the ones in Miami, I could tell you about the ones in DC, and probably in other places that are doing amazing work helping people with not just their DACA, but their citizenship application. We know that right now there's a lot of people that are being eligible to vote, being eligible to register to become a citizen. And so the help is out there. We just have to kind of learn how to maneuver it and look for it online and Google things. But one of the things that I think is really important is to start thinking about what's going to happen when immigration reform does occur. We have 11 million people that need to go through a process. And from what we are seeing already from the Senate legislation, the process is not going to be easy, and it's not going to be inexpensive. As a matter of fact, what we see a lot of times is that it's very expensive, and for families who have, you know, kids and you know, partners, it's probably going to be a lot. So I think that one of the most important things to have is these relationships with the churches that can help their community, that could help their members, maybe even doing collections or something like that. But, Lisa, I don't know.
Yeah, I can add to that I mean, people like in many other situations and issues, can resort to community agencies. Every city have a large number of community agencies who provide some kind of services for immigrants. And where I live in Louisville, I mean, we have many community agencies who right now, some way or another, are assisting immigrants. And those community agencies, including or adding the churches, are in the process of getting ready for the time when, by God's grace, there will be the opportunity for a comprehensive immigration reform, which is coming, and the churches are preparing to do that. One thing we need to keep in mind that it's very important, and it's a message that we need to share all the time, is to particularly to the immigrant, is to be very careful with where they go to get these services, because I mean, predators are everywhere, and once the window is open, people need to be very careful. I'm not saying that the churches are saints and that they are the only one who will be honest. I think they tend to be honest, but there are many other people who can take advantage of that, and we need to be careful with that.
I would just also add that the organization World Relief is a really great organization that specializes in refugee resettlement, but also they actually have a lot of people on their staff who are well versed and trained at helping immigrants to integrate into society. And they're actually in the midst right now of a major campaign to train churches to be able to help in that integration process after immigration reform passes. So in faith, we're believing it's going to pass, and if it passes, then that's going to be the next big step, is integration. And so World Relief is a good place to start if you are a Christian and trying, or not even just a Christian, anybody actually, but especially if you're in a church and you're looking for a place to go. Also, most big denominations, most mainline denominations especially, have an office of immigrant services somewhere in that national body, and so at the very least you could call that office to see where you should start. They would be able to point you in the right direction.
Thank you all for sharing that information. So we're going to go to Jenny Lear's question next that's been voted up. Is there a crucial misconception about immigration reform that is keeping, let's see, let me go back to that question, sorry. Well, okay, I've lost it, but that's keeping allies from joining in
Yes.
to the movement. And Jose, you've mentioned allies a few times, so.
Let me just jump into this, because I think what I've found in some of these uncomfortable conversations that I've been having across the country is, I remember a woman once in Milwaukee after a presentation said to me, I just never thought that it was my issue. And then I said, well, I'm sorry, ma'am, like, where are you from? And she's like, no, I'm American. No, but like, where's your family from? Oh, my grandparents are from Ireland. Well, it's your issue, right? I mean, again, like, there are two groups of people in America, right, that cannot claim to be immigrants, which are Native Americans, right, to whom all of us are quote unquote illegal because we're the ones that came here, and slaves, right, the forced migration of African slaves, the slaves that built this country. Mind you, there are many undocumented Caribbeans and Africans that we don't even talk about when we talk about immigration in this country, right? So the fact that people are not even remembering, right, that they have immigrant backgrounds, and that when they're Irish, Italian, German, Polish great-grandparents crossed the border that was the Atlantic Ocean and landed on Ellis Island with no papers. No papers. There was no papers when people landed, right? Like, people think that it's not their issue when it is. I think what we're suffering here, you know, I mean, President Obama likes to talk a lot about the fierce urgency of now. When it comes to this issue, there isn't a fierce urgency of now. And sometimes I wonder, you know, this is a question that I ask when I speak around the country, like, is it because, you know, you have a babysitter and, you know, your food is picked, right, and harvested? Is it because you don't think this issue impacts you? Because so long as, you have low wage labor, you're good to go. Like, you don't need to speak up. Well, guess what? You do, right? You do need to speak up, and you have a role. So I think that for me is probably the biggest misconception, is people think that it's not their issue and that they don't have a role. For me, that's a big misconception.
And this is Carlos here. I call that, Jose, communal amnesia. It's kind of a cultural communal amnesia that we have, and I think that amnesia it's informed or shaped mostly because of the fact that we have lost as a country so much because of our independent spirit and our disconnect, where we see just my immediate family and my immediate group of people are as the center of the world. And I have that amnesia from those who surround me, which form the community. And the community is not just my immediate family, but the community, it's everyone.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think it's really important, and like Jose, I don't do as much, but I do go and I speak at campuses and colleges, and I talk to young people. And one of the things that I tell people is, you can disagree on this issue, and it's okay to disagree on this issue. But one of the things that's really important is to come together to say, and I think that this is something that a lot of people do not disagree on, is that there is a problem. Our immigration system is antiquated, and we need to figure out how to fix it, because it is affecting not just 11 million people, it is affecting the whole entire United States. And so I think that for me, one of the things that's really important is that we have to realize that this is not going to go away by trying to sweep it underneath the rug. There's more and more people. Just recently in the news, there was this woman that had been with a man for 10 years, captured her, and people would ask her, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you run away? And she said, well, he said, and he was threatening me with immigration. And so there's a lot of things that are happening in our community, and we need to really speak out, and we really need to do something. This is a crucial issue, and it's a moral issue. We are right now currently seeing just so many children being abused in detention centers, people being deported and separated from their families. And so we have to do something about this. We can't just, be inactive and be afraid of an argument that we may have, because there's human lives at risk right now.
Yep.
Ryan, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So the question is there a crucial misconception about immigration reform that keeps allies from giving support to their legislators to take action, or really generally, joining in this conversation?
Yeah. Okay. So I think that, but when I think about that question with regard to my people, evangelicals, right? So I think that the number one thing that stands in the way is the rule of law question. It's the whole thing about, and it comes from Romans, from the book of Romans, which is a really great book, by the way. If anybody hasn't read it, you got to pick it up and read it, maybe tonight on your way to bed. But book of Romans, chapter 12, Paul goes into this really profound treatise on the relationship of people to the state, and he's talking about how we should be obeying our rulers. We cannot we do not resist the authorities. And the thing that really strikes me when I look at that passage, actually there's three things that strike me when I look at that. Number one, where I think there's a misconception, is that Paul is saying that all authority is good authority, like that anyone who has power or some level of position is therefore whatever they do is good. And I think that, all we need to do is take a little bit of a look into history, just a little bit, to understand that's not true, right? Like, when we look back at slavery, today, I hope anyway, we'd all agree that though it was the law of the land, it was not good, right? So, and that's why this country had to fight a war to be able to end it. Likewise, we would look at, and I know these are extreme examples, but they're extreme because you get the clearest understanding by looking at extreme examples, but we would look at Hitler, who by law declared that Jewish people be removed from that land and put into concentration camps, and actually used the American system of removal of Native Americans as his prototype. He was copying what we did on American soil when he did that to Jews in Europe. And we would look at the laws that he passed then and go, no, like, that's not good. And so that's one misconception, is I don't think that Paul is saying that all laws are good and therefore should be obeyed. I think what Paul actually has an assumption that he says in the text. He actually says in the text, authorities are put in place in order to do good, in order to uphold the good, and to punish the evil. But then you have to ask the question, well, what if they don't do the good? What if they don't punish the evil? What then? Well, then you go back to Romans 11. And Romans 11, I'm sorry, at the beginning of Romans 12, Paul says, don't be conformed to this world, but let your mind be renewed. And so we are not supposed to be thinking in the ways of this world. We're supposed to be renewed. And Jesus himself told us what renewal looks like. It looks like loving our neighbor. And actually, it even looks like loving Jesus, who was an immigrant, right? So when you get caught up in that rule of law thing, you really miss that. And then you also miss what comes after Romans 12, which is the Romans 13, where it says, actually, what it means to obey the law is to love your neighbor. And so if you're going to really obey the law, you got to love your neighbor. And if the law of man does not allow you to love your neighbor, then it is up to us to stand with the law of God as opposed to the law of man. And sometimes we have to make that choice, which is why Martin Luther King went to jail, from Birmingham jail. That's what that was all about.
So Lisa is preaching now, and that is a wonderful way to start closing us out. I was just going to ask you the question you just answered, which comes from Josh, and I love this question. And so I'm going to do what they do on these presidential debates and just do a show of hands. Would y'all, is how he types it, y'all, which is why I love it, consider that Jesus was an immigrant? Your own theological opinion. Just raise your hand. Was Jesus?
My eyebrows are raised.
Absolutely.
Great. So we've just got one question that I'd love for you to answer because I still believe it's the most provocative question, not just on immigration, but on citizenship and for us as a country right now, that I'd love for you to close with, and then I'll give just one brief final word in about a minute or less, because we are going to close after this. How do you define American?
Go.
Yeah, I'll start. I'll start here. I think that obviously the film is very, in that particular question, I think is very poignant, very clear, because to me, I mean, it's undefinable in many, many, many ways. And that's one of the problems that we have had, because we have tried to define how an American look, and how do an American behave, what does an American eat, how does an American speak, and so I think that in many ways it's undefinable. But let me just give one trait of an American that I think is very, very important. I think that Americans are very grateful. They're grateful people. Naturally, they're grateful people. They recognize the blessings, the privilege that they have as a people. And those are things that most people don't realize they have not necessarily earned. They have received that as a gift, as a blessing that are being passed along to them. So, talking about that, I think sometimes I have trouble with a phrase like earned path to citizenship. Who has earned the path to citizenship? Not me. I haven't earned it. It was given to me as a gift, and I'm grateful for it. So Americans are grateful. And I think that because Americans are grateful, that's why I still believe and I hope that we will see change coming, even from the Hill in Washington.
I would add to that I think Americans are ones who have been given a whole lot of grace. That we're grateful because we've received grace. And I often hear when I go and I speak in different places that we are a blessed people. We've been blessed with so much. And usually what people are looking at when they say we've been blessed is our material wealth. And, you know, we have a lot of material wealth. We really do. You know, but as an African American, hello, somebody, who also actually has Native American heritage in my blood and lineage, I can't help but look back at my own family and know that wealth that we have now was built on the backs of people who had their work stolen, had their lives stolen, had their families stolen, and their land stolen. And so it is, and then this is the most amazing thing. Once we were freed, once slaves were freed, and once Native Americans have, even now, like begun to move out into the world and begin to affect and change us all, there's been grace given on the other side of that. And so we're a land full of people who've received a lot of grace, and as such, it is incumbent upon us to be ones who give it.
Jose, you're gonna finish?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
So you can finish.
First. Ladies first. Go ahead, Gabby.
So to me, it's a combination, right? It's like Americans home, right? And even though I was born in Ecuador and I love my roots because I love the food, right? And I love my family. Um, American just means home to me, and it means the place where I feel comfortable. It means the place where I want to be in and contribute and give back. For me, it's a mixture of what liberty and freedom stand for. And yeah, it's a term that is so loaded, right? And whenever somebody says you're not an American, I get really upset. That's like one of the terms that really upsets me, because I tell people you don't know what's in my heart. And so there's this in one of the films that, or actually it's very short. I don't even know how to call this, Jose, but when the girl says, you know, I wasn't born in America. American was born in me. Right?
Yeah.
It resonated with me, that statement, because that's really how I feel, right? The fact that since I was a little girl growing up in this nation, learning the language, learning, you know, about it, and even during the walk, right, from Miami to DC, I learned to discover Florida and Georgia and South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia in ways that I don't think I could feel about, you know, other things. So to me, to be an American is to want to make this nation better. It's a desire to help other people and to eventually be able to become a citizen.
Okay, so I'm going to answer this really as short as I possibly can. There are many ways I define American, but I define American for my own specific journey as a fight. I think America is something you fight for. I think America is this beautiful, imperfect thing that we all have to fight for. And I think what must not get lost in this entire conversation, as a nation of immigrants, I think in many ways, immigrants in this country, documented and undocumented, show Americans what America.
Did we lose Jose?
I hope not.
Oh no. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Well, oh no. So we're gonna post that, I promise, on social media how Jose finishes defining American in case we didn't capture that on video. It is the close of the hour anyway, and so it's almost fitting. First of all, I thank everyone for participating. Lisa, Carlos, Sharon, Gabby, and Jose, who I am sure will get his internet back soon. The film is documented, and you can go to documentedthefilm.com and find out where it is playing. We're in many cities still theatrically. We'll be in San Diego soon, and hopefully a city near you. And if it's not at a city near you, we will also be airing on CNN later this month in June. If we didn't get to your question tonight, I do hope that you'll ask the panelists over social media your questions so that you can join the conversation. And you can do so both on social media or by going to defineamerican.com. Take the pledge for immigration fairness today. Thank you so much for your time and for participating. Have a great night.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.